Hello campers, welcome back to the Casual Car Camper. Today we're going to talk about splitting wood and what to get to split wood. Now you can get all sorts of things to cut wood with. This is your basic wood handled axe. As you've probably figured out by now, I like modifying things, so I put a little bit of tool dip on this, gives me a little bit better grip and also helps preserve the handle. These are good for splitting medium to small size logs, such as this log here. So we're going to put this on our splitting log here. When possible, always try to have a splitting log. And technique is also important. What I like to do is I hold it with one hand at the bottom, one hand at the top, my toe pointing at my target, my back foot sort of like a fencing stance. I give it 1 or 2 practice just to get range if I have to step back. This stance also allows me to get power from my legs, and it allows me to jump back if something goes wrong. Now, when I'm swinging, I'm not aiming at the wood I'm trying to split. I'm actually aiming at the top of the wood I'm got it on top of, or whatever is below what I'm splitting. It's very similar to athletes and the idea of follow through. So all you're going to do is you're going to go up and come down. And sometimes you don't get it all the way through on the first try. So you're just going to brace the board, lever up the axe, rotate it. So you're aiming at a part that hasn't already been split. And unfortunately, this log is a little too heavy duty, a little too thick for a splitting axe. So then we move up a size. This is called a maul. One end is it has a sledgehammer head. The other head is a little heavier than your standard splitting axe. This is designed, 1, to be heavy and plow through the wood, and 2, if it gets stuck in the wood, you can bang it in with a sledgehammer. Pretty much the same technique though, and the weight helps go right through the wood. Okay campers, before you start splitting wood, you want to make sure that you're safe. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is extremely important. I always wear my safety goggles. These are my prescription ones. I also am wearing a pair of heavy duty woodworking gloves for splitting wood and stuff, or doing yard work. I always have a heavy pair of leather gloves with me. I'm also wearing steel-toed boots. This is because if I miss on a swing and bring it down towards my foot and I can't get my foot out of the way, the metal will protect my foot better than leather with nothing underneath. Never do this type of work with open-toed footwear. It's just not safe. Always remember, when you're cutting, do not hold the piece, because if you're holding something small like this and you have something heavy and or sharp, you could a finger, a thumb, a hand, and if you're in the middle of the wood, so whenever you're cutting wood, keep your body as far back as possible. Put your hand down. The only time I hold the piece is when I am centering the punch. I'll hold the wedge in the center on the piece, tap it a little bit. When I know it's going to hold up on its own, move my hand out of the way and keep my hand clear. But one last safety note, if you're feeling tired, if your muscles are hurting you, say, I have enough wood for now, call it a night, relax around the fire, and enjoy the company of your friends. Okay, so our next piece I'm going to demonstrate for you is another type of maul. It's called a splitting maul. It's got a little bit more angled of a head. You see how it's curved here, and they're usually a little heavier. The impact point at the back of the head of the maul is a little bit better suited for hitting with a sledgehammer. Side by side. They have the same width, but the curve is a little bit different, and this comes out sharply, the splitting maul, to push the parts apart more. And I'm gonna give you a quick demonstration. Okay, so I missed on that second one, but you get the idea. Though that was 8 pounds, the other maul I was using was 6 pounds. The weight does make a slight difference. Weight does make a slight difference because you're taking advantage of the weight of the object to push through as well. Basic formulas of physics: force equals mass times acceleration. The more mass and the faster you're going, the more force you're going to get. The more force you can get into the wood, the easier it is to split. You can either spend the energy from your muscles to get the head of the maul going fast enough to split the wood, or you can let the weight do half the work for you. So more weight, less speed you need. Lower the weight, more speed you need. Up from the mauls, you have your sledgehammer and your splitting woods. Now, first what we're going to do is I'm going to show you this. This is called a slide log splitter, manually operated. The way this works is you put it on your log, you line it up, get it started, and you just move it up and down and hit it down as hard as you can. And if it's a smaller piece, and it will eventually go all the way through. I use a smaller piece for this because I find to me, someone that's been splitting wood a lot since they were a kid, it's a little more effort than I'm used to doing with my splitting maul, my splitting axe, or even a sledgehammer and a splitting wedge. So I kind of like it for the idea of getting a groove started to put in my splitting wedge, but by itself, it's not an optimal splitting tool. So for our next demonstration, I'm going to use a little bit larger piece because what I'm about to show you, that's what it's designed to do. It's designed for the larger pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the log splitter to get us a nice center point. And now I have 3 different splitting wedges. So our first one is your standard thin splitting wedge. What you do is you put this in the log and you hit it with the sledgehammer, and it pushes the wood apart. This is what's called a grenade. It works much the same way, except instead of just splitting it along one plane, it splits it in 2, so it splits the wood out faster. And then what I have is, this is a thicker wedge. It's actually an old maul that I had laying around, and I converted it into using a splitting wedge because at the time I didn't need an extra maul, so I just used the head as a splitting wedge. So here I have my 8-pound sledgehammer. I'm going to put the wedge in. You want to make sure your wedge is straight up and down. I'm going to stand toe pointing right at the center of the wedge. Do a couple practice swings, because the problem is with the wedge, you do not want to hit the wedge such that your hammer ends up like this, because this will break your handle. So you want to make sure when you're hitting a wedge with a sledgehammer, or you're hitting your maul with a sledgehammer, that you're aiming such that the metal hits the target, because if the wood hits the target, you could break your handle and then you have to go buy a new handle. There are covers that you can get when you're replacing the handle, put a handle on that will protect it. They're usually large foam rubber. I didn't have one when I repaired this, but it is an idea when you're buying one or you're repairing one and you're putting the handle on to pick one up so that you hit the foam rubber and you extend the life of the handle. Now it's split in half, but my wedge is a little stuck, so all we're going to do is take and tap. Sometimes you have to put it on the ground. We're going to tap it up, then we're going to tap it to the side, and it's going to come out. Now this log, still a little on the large side, not quite the size we need to cut it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how the larger splitting does. Now when you're setting up your wedge, you want to put it in about the center of what you're splitting. When you're setting up, you want to set it up with a crack if possible, because that's a good weak spot. It'll take less energy, and because it's already a fault line through the wood, it's a weak spot, and it'll split open much easier that way. If you miss short, it's better than missing long, so don't worry about it. Okay, so while I was doing that, you saw the log fall over. That's again why I try to keep back. That's why I keep my feet ready to move in case it falls. That's also why I wear steel-toed boots, because if something falls, you don't want to hurt your feet. So you want to be ready to move back. You want to have heavy footwear. I usually wear steel toes. So that is the full size. Now, I know you're thinking, why are you showing us this full-size stuff? This is going to take way too much room in my car. You're right. But knowing the full-size stuff, how it works, is very similar if you're going to either buy or make accessories that are more transportable. This here is my homemade 8-pound 18-inch handle sledgehammer. I named it Crystal Blue Persuasion. My dad has one. He taught me how to make them. He named his Mjolnir. The way I made this is I took a sledgehammer that the head had broken off the handle, took an old handle from, I believe this was an axe handle, took the end, used epoxy in the center, attached the epoxy, and then the handle didn't have a good grip, so what I did was I took sports tape, like hockey tape, wrapped it around, then went back, wrapped it around once, went back over, and I rolled it up so that I could get like a rope effect. Then one more turn back around to get a nice firm grip, and then I dipped it with tool dip, also known as plastic dip, also known as Flex Seal. You can get that about anywhere. We're gonna start with our short-handled sledgehammer, and we're gonna have some fun with our grenade. Now, the one interesting thing about the grenade, it has a much smaller tip, which makes it a little easier to get in. And again, it's very similar idea. You just want to hit this, but with the short handle, you're just going to use one hand. You can use two hands if you need a little bit more guidance, but you can just now, I don't know if you can hear it on the mic, but you'll actually hear the wood split. Sometimes that's how you know it's about to give. It was just making that noise, so I know this is about to split. And it's going to split in 3 different directions. Okay, so this one has a knurl in it, so it doesn't want to split even with that in there. This is why I like to have multiple sizes and multiple thicknesses. This is my maul head. So we're going to put this in, find a thinner spot, and just drive it in and try to get it so it goes in evenly. And you know you've done some good when your other wedge comes out, because that means the spot it was stuck in has just widened out. Now sometimes you will find the wedge wants to go sideways, depending on where the hot spots in your wood are. You can either keep going with its tendency, or you just spin it, knock it straight by kicking it to the side, maybe realign it. So we're going to move it here. So the issue is why this didn't want to split too well is you actually had an ingrown branch. So when we were trying to split along here, the branch was actually holding it in place. So I had to split the wood around it enough that it would just slide off the branch. And when you're splitting, you always want to keep your work area clean so you don't trip on a log or your tools. So I like to keep my tools out of the way. When you have a nice big log to split on, it's real easy. You just put the stuff on the other end of the log. So now, this is my short-handled. Actually, this is the other half of the handle for Crystal Blue Persuasion. This is my short-handled maul. Very similar make. Cut the handle down till it would fit in here. Filled it with epoxy, put epoxy on the bottom so it would hold. And because this part of the handle already has a nice grip on it, I didn't bother adding one. So I used the bottom, and it also spreads out nicely so my hand will stop. And again, this is just one hand. Again, you want to follow through, so with good follow through, you can one hand split with this maul. This is a 6-pound maul, but it still does a good job. Now, I also have 2 hatchets. These again are good for smaller wood. This is your classic style. It's basically a short-handled axe. Same head. This is a more utility style based on a tomahawk. It's got a hammer on the back so you can pound it a little bit, but it's more for pounding in like steaks and stuff. This is a good camping axe. It's got a hook on it so you can pull stuff down. Something thick like this board, I would not cut with a hand axe. This is just too thick. The hand axe isn't going to be able to produce enough force. But a small piece like this little guy, this is perfect for a hand axe. Again, with the short handle, I'm just using it one-handed. The one advantage of the old hatchet style is the head's a little heavier. This is a much lighter but easier to carry. It gives me a little bit more control, but we'll still cut right through most wood. Larger piece like this might be a little more difficult, but we're going to try it. I don't know if you could see that, but I used the acceleration part of the equation instead of the force because, again, light. And this, I was a little off. I wasn't dead center. So instead of splitting the board, I cut it, but then I was able to split it. And my one last thing I want to show you is what's called, what I call the squaring off method of splitting. Okay, so for our squaring off method, we're going to use the utility hatchet. Instead of aiming for the center and getting 2 even pieces, I'm going to aim for the side. And that was a little too far in, but so again, aim for the side. Pieces will go flying, so if you're camping and there's people around, tell them to steer clear while you're splitting wood, or wherever you are. If you're splitting wood, make sure people know to stay clear, because wood can fly 10-15 feet very easily because of the force being used. So again, we're going to split along the side. We'll get there eventually. That one didn't split all the way down, but it split enough, and we can just rip it off, rotate it 45 degrees, go to the next side. If you don't get quite enough off, you can always go back and get a little bit more off. And if you find yourself getting tired and you miss a lot, call it a night. And that's what I think I'm going to do right now. But I'm going to switch to my maul so you can still see what the final look should look like. Rotate it. So you're going to have a square block. This makes it a lot thinner, and then you can just go into the center, and you have two options here. You can keep just going around and squaring it and getting basically kindling pieces like this. Or you can just say, okay, that's enough that I can now split this with whatever I'm using and just split it down the center. So that's the squaring off method. I use it a lot with my small camping equipment, my small axes when I'm camping. Okay, campers, that is your basic overview of the main types of wood splitting devices, that at least hand use. There's obviously a lot of pneumatic devices. There are various mechanical things, chainsaws and stuff, and saws. This is mainly splitting, not cutting. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we talked about today. So we have our various sizes of axes. We have a full-size cutting axe, full-length handle, two-handed use. It's good if for everyday use. We'll split most wood with time. Harder wood, I recommend doing it in squares. You have your camp hatchet. This is good for splitting small wood, creating strips for kindling. You have your utility hatchet, which has a lot of various uses with the hammer on the hammerhead on the back. The very slight, again, this is more for shaving than actually splitting, but you can use to split. And then we have our three mauls, our 6-pound maul, our 6-pound short handle maul, and then our 8-pound splitting maul. These are good for splitting whatever. Most of the time you can go through a lot of wood with one hit. Unfortunately, things like hardwoods will probably need multiple hits, or will need the assistance of your various splitting wedges. You have your thin wedges, you have your thicker wedges, you have your 4-way wedges. Those are usually meant for starting a wood. They work best on round wood. And then to drive all the above in, you have your sledgehammers. Full-length sledgehammer advantage. It gives you a little bit more control. You can use both hands. You won't tire out as quickly. You don't have to worry about hurting your hand. Then you have your short-handled, transportable sledgehammers. The downside is you are only using one hand, but you can switch back and forth. So these are all the various tools. You won't need all of these. The main ones I like are to have, if I was to choose, would be a maul, an axe, and a sledgehammer. Manual slide log splitter is okay. I found that I was exerting a lot more energy and making a lot more noise than I would be with a splitting tool like a sledgehammer and a splitting wood. So that's the end of today's episode. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can always leave a comment down in the comment section below or contact me on The Casual Car Camper on Facebook.com, linked in the description, and I will do a video reply. And remember, as always, as long as you're having fun, you're doing camping right.